What's the stupidest policy your kid's school ever enforced? My son came home from school completely soaked and shivering. He said he threw up during lunch and the janitor made him clean it himself. Mr. Davis handed me a mop and said I made the mess. I'd clean it, he whispered. Then he made me sit in my wet clothes all afternoon. My blood started boiling. Did you ask to call me? The office said you were probably at work and couldn't be bothered. I asked him to walk me through exactly what happened. He'd been feeling sick since morning, but the teacher told him to stop making excuses. During lunch, he couldn't hold it anymore and threw up right at his table. All the other kids moved away and started laughing, he said. Mr. Davis came over yelling about how he wasn't paid to clean up after careless kids. The janitor had forced my 8-year-old to mop up his own vomit while other students watched. When my son's shirt got soaked in the process, he asked to call home for clean clothes. Mr. Davis said I should have thought of that before making a mess, my son continued. He told me to deal with the consequences. My son spent the entire afternoon in wet, contaminated clothes. His teacher noticed but said the office had already decided he couldn't call home. When he asked to at least wash his hands properly, she told him to stop disrupting class. I kept gagging from the smell on my shirt, he said, but everyone kept telling me to be quiet. He reeked of vomit and his shirt was still damp when I picked him up. I immediately called the school. We don't have spare clothes for every little accident, the secretary said dismissively. Children need to learn responsibility. I asked to speak with the principal, but she'd already left for the day. The secretary took my message but said they'd likely call me back next week since it wasn't an emergency. Not an emergency? I repeated. My child sat in contaminated clothing for 4 hours. She sighed like I was overreacting and said accidents happen all the time. I hung up and started researching health department regulations about bodily fluids in schools. That evening, I discovered the school had violated multiple health codes. Students aren't supposed to clean biological hazards, and keeping a sick child in soiled clothing creates contamination risks for everyone. I called 3 other parents whose kids were in my son's class. Turns out this wasn't an isolated incident. Mr. Davis had made several students clean their own accidents over the past month. One girl had to mop up blood from a nosebleed while dizzy. We thought about complaining, but didn't want to cause trouble, one mom admitted. The next morning, I walked into the principal's office with my son's contaminated clothes in a sealed bag. Since when do we make sick children clean up bodily fluids? I asked, placing the bag on her desk. This violates basic health codes. Principal Jones looked uncomfortable as she opened the bag and immediately recoiled from the smell. I handed her printouts of the health department regulations and the district's own policy manual. According to these rules, my son should never have touched that mop, I continued. She started making excuses about understaffing and budget constraints. I cut her off and mentioned I'd already called the health department. An inspector was coming that afternoon. She immediately called Mr. Davis to her office while I waited. When the janitor arrived, he started defending his actions by saying kids needed to learn consequences. Principal Jones quickly silenced him as she read through the health code violations I'd highlighted. We could face serious fines, she whispered to him. The health inspector arrived 2 hours later and found multiple violations beyond my son's incident. The inspector issued a formal citation and gave them 10 days to correct all violations or face closure. Principal Jones called an emergency staff meeting that same afternoon. Within a week, they had a full stock of emergency clothes and a new policy. Any child who gets sick calls home immediately, no exceptions.